The USDA recently launched a pilot program that's going to allow local or independent cattle processing facilities the ability to get official USDA grading remotely.
It's always great talking with the Working Ranch family.
Well, I'll tell you what, this latest news that come out regarding the USDA doing this pilot program on remote.
More affordable and more better access to.
Leah Biondo and Patrick Robinette with U.S. Cattlemen's Association joins me today as we talk about the details of this pilot program, how it came about, how it's going to function, and why they believe it's going to be a major game changer for so many of us in the cattle industry.
Cattle to one of the big guys.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, I want to go to you. As Leah was saying, you're going to give us a little bit more benefits from remote grading in the cattle industry. Listen in as we learn about the details and what it means to us as beef producers on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And we welcome you back here again to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills, your host, and glad to have you tune in and joining us on our program today. By the way, if this is your first time tuning in, I want to tell you that if you do hear something today, you want to go back and listen to it again, it's pretty simple. You can go to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com or any podcast provider out there. You can download it from there as well. If you're listening via podcast, well, we appreciate you taking the time to download and tune in. And if you like what you hear, let your friends know, let your neighbors know, let us know as well. Like it, leave a comment. We sure appreciate that. That also helps me to kind of know if we're heading the right direction with the content of our programs as well. Now, don't forget to stay tuned through the entire show as meteorologist Don Day will be joining us as we take a look at our long-term weather. So we've got a lot packed in for today's show. Well, let's jump into our subject. And let me just say, I did not realize what we were dealing with in terms of potential impact to our industry until I had my conversation with our guest here today. And I think you're going to find that out for yourself as well. So with that, let's introduce our guest today. Joining us, Leah Biondo, who's the Executive Vice President of the U.S. Cattlemen's Association, and Patrick Robinette, who is the Chair of the Independent Beef Processors Committee for USDA. He is out of North Carolina, but on the road today in Oregon. Guys, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Appreciate you having us on here, Justin. It's always great talking with the Working Ranch family.
Well, I'll tell you what, this latest news that come out regarding the USDA doing this pilot program on remote grading, it was kind of exciting to hear about. And Leah, I'm not going to stutter around and carry on with what all happened with that. I want you to kind of give us the breakdown on that press release and that information that came out from the USDA.
Yeah, Justin. So this is big news, and we're very lucky to have Mr. Robinette here with us today to break it down into things that we can come away from this podcast with. But the news is that the USDA has announced a pilot program. So a pilot program, we're testing the waters. We're making sure this program works. We're making improvements to it. But a pilot program for a USDA AMS remote carcass grading program. And like I said, Patrick's going to dive into the details here, but this concept, this idea of allowing independent processors more affordable and more better access to grading opportunities is going to open up so many doors for independent processors, independent producers, local cattlemen, regional cattlemen. It's going to be huge, and it's really going to impact the marketplace because historically, these programs have only really been available at an affordable and accessible price to the big four packers. And so now bringing this program to the independent processors and the regional processors, this is going to allow producers to access some of those branded beef programs like certified Angus beef. And you won't have to send your cattle to one of the big guys.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, I want to go to you. As Leah was saying, you're going to give us a little bit more of the technical details. We'll get into that as we go through our program here today. But initially, just your thoughts right off the bat as chair of the Independent Processors Committee for in this, working on this on behalf of producers, your initial thoughts coming out of it.
Yes, sir. This is it's earth-shaking, and it is going to be a market disruptor to the big four. As Leah said just a second ago, the only access to grading has been to the big four. And that's been this way for the last 20, 30 years. And the way that this all came about was us meeting with AMS about another issue. And once we solved that, I said, yep, now I'm not satisfied. Now we got to talk about grading. Mm-hmm. And this has been a 3-year process because they first took the data that I gave them to say, yes, Patrick, this is a one-off. And then they found out this really is a issue across the country. And then, building the program from there. But for the first time ever, the cattleman does not have to give up their rights and their margins to their animals. Mm-hmm. That anybody can have graded beef at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, and as we were talking before we went on air, was just the fact that this is really, and you both have stated this, not to try to restate what you've already said, but it's a big win for producers. Many of folks that have really tried to market their own product off the farm to the plate. This is a big win.
Correct. We've been direct marketing our cattle for 24 years. And like when I go to a restaurant and chef goes, well, I buy choice ribeye. And for 24 years, I've had choice ribeyes in my hand, but legally I couldn't say a word about it. And just by not having that word on my label has stopped restaurants, grocery stores from buying from me. Mm-hmm. Now I can put that word on that label and give credit to the carcass that it deserves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really, I think for a lot of folks, you have to think through this and it starts to sink in and you realize how important this was. I want to talk a little bit, as I said, we'll talk technical details coming up in the next segment, but let's talk about this being a pilot program. Where's this going to be piloted at?
Nationwide. So what occurred was it was supposed to have rolled out to just 16 facilities across the country so that the concept could be that they had put in, did test runs on, let's just put it in practice, but in a controlled practice. And the Biden administration announced to roll it out. And they did it being done at the stockyard. It was really targeting the cattlemen's as constituents, but it's nationwide. And the uniqueness about this, and as Leah stated, it's being identified as a pilot for the simple fact there's going to be some altercations done as this is in practice. There's going to be some adjustments that are going to have to be made. But the fun part about it is unscheduled grading has already been accounted for in all the budgets. So as long as the cattlemen and the processors follow the rules, this is our new way of life. Mm-hmm. If we go back, grading started in 1916, and it was the USDA. Every facility had a grader and an inspector on their at their facility, and as a way for the USDA to provide customer confidence to meats that they were buying. Sometime in the late 40s is when it became a charge, and then over time, those animals that were going to those independent processors were diverted to the big four. And so that's where the cost became ineffective. Mm-hmm. So us going to the USDA AMS to discuss this issue, it was brought up. Why are we operating off of over 100-year-old policy and operational procedures with today's technology not being included?
Yeah.
That was the basis of the whole conversation that began this whole process.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's a lot, and there's probably a lot of things that are in our U.S. cattle industry that are a little bit antiquated in some of this kind of stuff. We've got just a couple minutes here before we head to break. Leah, just back to you real quick. And I know Patrick is the chair of that committee. You working on behalf of U.S. cattlemen's in D.C. there. Just the starts of these conversations and working through this, how amenable was it in working with the USDA to get this through? How willing were they to work with you on this?
Right. And that's a great question. In 2020, the Independent Beef Processing Committee with Patrick as the chair, they created this idea, this concept as a policy resolution. So if you think about it in this context of the slow wheels of bureaucracy, it was relatively quick working with them from conception to implementation. And of course, here we're just talking about a pilot program. But if we can show success, if we can show that this is providing value to producers and processors, maybe we can get Congress to create a more permanent program with more permanent funding. So, USDA, they're searching for ways to create a fair, more competitive marketplace. They have a senior advisor in USDA that reports directly to the White House. He's a senior advisor for fair and competitive markets. So they have people on staff right now, the Biden administration does. It's looking for angles, looking for ways to increase the market share for independent producers and processors. And it's not just for us. Selfishly, it's for consumers. For them, consumers are voting constituents just as much as independent producers are. And so they want to see cost of prices for food go down. They want to see grocery store shelves stocked in emergency situations. And so creating a more resilient, more independent, more sovereign food supply system is really a good political value for them as well. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, guys, let's take a break here. When we come back, we're going to start talking some of the technical details of this latest coming out from the USDA on this remote grading and what it means. We'll continue into looking a little bit more in depth about what it means to us as ranchers here in the countryside as well. My guests today, Leah Biondo and Patrick Robinette with U.S. Cattlemen's Associations. This segment today brought to you by Diamond V, natural immune support postbiotic feed additives, because your animal's health deserves a healthier approach. Find out more at diamondv.com. We'll be back after this.
When your goal is to help animals reach their full potential, health matters. Diamond V offers a fresh perspective on animal health, a perspective that supports gut health, strengthens immunity, and enhances performance. For those who choose to invest in keeping healthy animals healthy, feeding Diamond V makes a statement about another dimension of profit, where margins are measured by confidence in your future. To get a fresh perspective, visit diamondv.com, because animal health deserves a healthier approach.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. We'll continue on here just a bit with our conversation with Leah Biondo and Patrick Robinette of the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. But first, I want to remind you that coming up on the 3rd of February, Stockman Source Beef Bulls will be having their sale. As you heard last week, if you joined us on our program, we had a conversation with both Jeremy Martin and Travis Chrisman, partners in that bull sale, about their program and what they're doing. Bulls that are raised in the range environment, that not going to melt on you, breeding for balance and performance in what they're doing on there. And if you want to find out more about what all they've got going on and take a look at their catalog, hey, you don't have to be in Nebraska. That's where they're headquartered out of, but you don't have to be from Nebraska to buy these bulls. You can be anywhere in the country. It's going to be carried on DV Auction. Their website, if you want to download a catalog or view the video on these bulls, sSourceBeefBulls.com. That is the website. Now, that sale will be held again February 3rd at Jeremy and Gail Martin's ranch, which is just southwest of North Platte, Nebraska, about 35 miles or so. They'll get started with the viewing at noon, and this is Central Time, and then the sale will get started with their cowboy auction on DV Auction at 3 p.m. February 3rd for Stockman Source Beef Bulls. They're going to be selling about 160 head of bulls, 35 head of those going to be Angus coming 2-year-old bulls, and then the rest of those, about 125 head, will be Sim-Angus bulls. Most of those coming too. There's going to be a few 18-month-old bulls in there as well. So check them out. sSourceBeefBulls.com is the website. That sale is going to be February 3rd, 3 o'clock Central Time. You can also catch that on DV Auction. Well, as we continue on now, my guest today, Leah Biondo, who's Executive Vice President of the U.S. Cattlemen's Association, and Patrick Robinette, who is the chair of the Independent Beef Processors Committee for USCA. Patrick, I want to go to you now. You've been working on this, as we heard in the previous segment. You guys have been working on this and finally get this pilot program through on this remote grading system. Now, let's talk some of the technical details of this and what that means, how this is going to happen.
Yes, sir. So it's as simple as the processor will make a cut between the 12th, 13th rib, expose the ribeye face, take out his or her phone, take a picture of that face with a tag, identification tag on it, then take a second picture with the ribeye grade grid chart, upload the pictures to this dedicated cloud account, Currently, the grader that's going to be assigned to doing this work is located in Nebraska. He would download the pictures. He would make the determination, fill out a report, and send it back. And at that point in time, the processor can then apply that grade to that label. And this is for all state and federal inspected facilities.
Okay. Regarding the details of this from a technical standpoint, so will there be a stamp on that carcass, or will they have that, or is that, how does that work?
Sir. Yep. So the USDA AMS is providing the plastic grid chart and then the grade stamps, and they'll send them to the plant. The FSIS will be responsible for maintaining control of the stamps. And so, ultimately FSIS is going to, okay, these carcasses are graded choice. So, make sure that the proper grade was assigned to the proper carcasses. But yes, they'll have a stamp put on the carcass. So let's say that it's a state or federal inspected facility and they do not do retail cuts. Let's just say they break it down to primals. They'll be able to put the stamp on the carcass, and then that stamp would then follow that primal to wherever its destination being cut is located. Then if the plant does break down the carcasses, they'll be able to roll that data of that grade and then apply that grade to the label. And it could be, and there's different versions. Some facilities have print on site labels. So then they just be able to insert the word into that, or they'll be able to print prime, choice, select, or the other grades, be able to print it on a separate sheet of like a separate sticker or a separate sheet of paper, and then slide it into the package of meat. And so then that grade will then be expressed to the consumer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So just a couple things as we're going through this. As you were sitting down and working through the details of this from a technical standpoint with the USDA, I'm sure there had to be some concern of the integrity of that stamp and the integrity of that process going on. Was there discussion revolving around that?
Oh, yes, sir. There was a lot of discussion on that. As cattlemen, we're great at, let's try to work around the system, right? And so that was the number one issue that USDA had. AI grading or camera grading has been allowed in the plant since this came along, but the rules stated that a physical grader had to be on site in order for that to be utilized. And so what we've determined how to do this is the producer or the processor is going to have to use a smartphone, whether it's an Android or an iPhone, doesn't matter. And they're going to have to leave their location services turned on so that when they take the picture, then at that point in time, there is a metadata that is distinct to that individual picture so that they would be able to determine whether, let's say they're taking the same picture of the same carcass, they're going to be able to get that right away.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So as I'm hearing this too, a lot of information and tracking of information has to be a part of this process as well.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, one of the things that we discussed through cattlemen is you got to tag these animals because there has to be an identification. There'll be an identification. Then that identification passes over to the carcass. And then that carcass tag will then be part of this picture. So both pictures with the grid chart and the ribeye face itself will have to have the tag in the picture. And so it would have the date. It would have the date of the carcass was harvested. It would have a number assigned or some sort of a tagging system, whatever the plant uses for identification of animal. And then it would have, a hot carcass weight on there too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the USDA is tracking, how many pounds of choice and they're going to do a lot of analytics in the background there with the data they're collecting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we think that the procedures that have been put in place will protect against the bad actors, but the bad actors will be spotted pretty fast. It will be fixed in a hurry.
Yeah. Well, and that's the case in any situation, probably in any of these.
Right.
The next thing I would address would be the cost of this. I know in the press release that I read, there was significant savings for producers that say I, just Joe Rancher out here, wanted to go sell a product that would have a USDA grade label stamp on it that would say prime, choice, or select. That's a pretty big cost for me to endure versus this that has this remote access element. That's pretty significant. Let's talk a little bit about the cost in this.
Yeah. So again, everything was, everything was put in theory, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is a set amount of time that a grader physically grade. And then, so that goes to that unscheduled grading fee of $114 an hour. But then there was a figuring on that, the grader has to physically download the pictures and then would have to physically write a report and then physically upload the report back to the processor or get on the phone. Maybe the picture is kind of blurry, or, maybe they're, hey, we need to get another picture just to maybe it's on the borderline between two grades. And so they accounted for that time. And so what was determined was doing this initially as a slot. So I believe it's from 1 to 12 head would be counted as 30 minutes of unscheduled grading. Now, the way we got to look at this, if I'm a processor and I submit one carcass to be graded in a week, it's going to be $52. If I'm submitting 12, it'll be $4.56. Okay.
Yep.
The issue is there's some concern that, that some people are going to be, the cost is going to be higher and others. Well, that's going to get down into processor management. Nobody says that the moment you harvest that animal, you have to take that picture for that grade. Many of these processors are holding on these carcasses for 14 to 21 days. So you can actually combine 2 to 3 harvest weeks. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And then submit all the grades at one time. Or maybe you're a processor and you say, okay, I'm going to offer grading the first week of the month. Mm-hmm. That way, then they're driving all the animals, because the only cost to the processor that the processor is then going to pass down to the producer will technically be only when he submits photos up to 100 carcasses a week. Mm-hmm. And so that's his only billing. And so there is some work that's going to have to be done to the processor in how to manage it, and mitigate that expense. So we're, the best in the end of each range of the number of head, the lowest amount is $4.36. But there is the possibility that a processor, with just one carcass graded, it'll be way higher than that. Now, we're thinking through evaluation of how much premium is not being assigned to these carcasses by saying just ribeye or just sirloin versus choice fine select. They've kind of figured that there's about a $300 per head premium that can be assigned to it. Mm-hmm. Again, the squishiness about it is a person a good marketer to be able to drive that price point into what they're charging? But overall, across the United States would be about $300 premium. So even if you're being charged that $52, you're still making a heck of a premium over what you were doing yesterday.
Yeah. Patrick, as you were talking about that, do you think, and maybe you already mentioned that, maybe that was what you were talking about a little bit. I want just to clarify. Do you think that independent processors are just going to say, hey, we're going to offer a grading system. Do you want it graded yes or no? When they send a bunch of pictures in for evaluation, it's going to be you and 30 other or 25 other, right. Say I'm just a guy wanting one done. For example, like this morning, I just come back from Belfou, South Dakota, picking up a beef there. And it'd be kind of interesting to know, what's my beef grading?
Right. And that's exactly right. It's really going to come down to processor management. Now, here's what I'm going to say. I hate to say this, but I actually had an experience of this. Unfortunately, there are processors that are going to say, I'm not doing one more thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So the producer needs to go to processor. Hey, this remote grading is available. I want to take advantage of it. If the processor says no, fine, I'm going to go find me another processor. Mm-hmm. Because we're always going to get down into the world of somebody is hungry for some more business. Somebody, some processor is going in that area. We'll end up doing it. And so that's where in the conversations with AMS, it literally came down to, in my determination, not theirs, but in my determination, it really comes down to, this is a program that is going to be solely producer driven. Mm-hmm. On how much is being done.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that and how it's being piloted, or just the conception of it as well. Let's take a break here, guys, and when we come back, let's talk about the 4 groups that this is going to impact. Of course, we know as ranchers, there's going to be some impact with us, but we'll dive a little deeper into that within the industry as well. My guest today, Leah Biondo, Patrick Robinette with the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. This segment brought to you by the American Gelbvieh Association. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics. Find out more at gelbvieh.org. We'll be back after this.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer-influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. We're talking about the pilot program that's now kicked out. USDA announced this latter part of January down in Denver at the National Western Stock Show. And it was remote grading, where working with independent beef processors where they can get USDA graded beef. Our guest today, Leah Biondo, Patrick Robinette with the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. I do want to get into the groups that it'll impact. As we were talking before we went on air, I really saw that some folks that try to direct sell their product is really going to give some benefit to them. Let's talk about these groups that it's going to impact the most. And either one of you, Patrick or Leah, whoever wants to start on this.
So I'll classify it into 4 different groups. So the immediate group is the independent processor. I'm over here in Baker City, Oregon, and next town over is LeGrand, and there's Jake Hines has a facility. I'm actually meeting with Jake right now. And Jake has a facility in the facility, but he also has a retail shop. Jake can now have a label that has a grade on his product, and then that consumer who is looking for that grade doesn't have to go to the grocery store now to be able to see it. And so that's the first group, and that's the immediate group. Those processors that have those retail shops, they're equal. They are now have market equality to the grocery stores. Mm-hmm. The second group, and this is going to be our largest demographic group, will be the producers, the cattlemen and women who are direct marketing the beef that they raise. Again, up to now, all they could say is ribeye steak or ribeye roast. Now they're going to be able to put a grade on that, on the product. You know, I'm sure somebody's out there going to be able to prove me wrong, but I don't think on this case, I don't know of a single farmer's market in anywhere in this country that has a graded beef opportunity or option on, in their stand. Mm-hmm. And so now they're going to be able to have, again, a word equal to the grocery store. And how many of these farmers market people walk around and they're buying their produce or buying flowers or buying spices, and then they go to the grocery store buying meat because they're looking for that word, because that word meant that I had a good experience. Mm-hmm. And so now we're going to be able to have those words on those labels in those markets, or even those producers that are direct marketing to the food service market or the independent grocery market. The third group are the seed stock producers. Currently seed stock producers, when they sell they sell the heifers, bred cows, or breeding bulls, and they have genetic papers. On those genetic papers, there is a side on there for EPDs on meat quality, right? Mm-hmm. And so what their animals have been sold to other producers. And then in order for them to collect that data back, they have to rely on those producers to track those calves all the way through the system, retrieve the data back after the feed yard, and then send it back to them. They can now have a diversified program, diversify their operation to be able to say, okay, we have a seed stock operation, but we also have our own beef operation, and then be able to capture that immediate data and not rely on somebody else to give it to them. Yeah. Also going back up to now, let's say the producers that have Angus cattle, those producers, in order to be able to say certified Angus, have to go to Big Four, and then the Big Four gets the margins. Because of that grid, that ribeye grid picture that's going to be taken, now the evaluation, okay, I have an Angus cattle. I can prove it was Angus. I can prove it met a grade. I proved that it had a ribeye dimension. Now they can say certified Angus beef on their label. Mm-hmm. And now instead of Cisco US Foods capturing the premiums of certified Angus in these food service houses, now the food service houses, those restaurants don't have to go through US Foods or Cisco. They can go directly to the cattle. Mm-hmm. The fourth group is going to be the feed yards. Now, again, I'm sure there's going to be some blowback.
Yeah.
But I feel pretty certain the feed yards that are being truthful would be agreeing with me. Even though we've had an improvement in our feed rations and we've got more efficient in feeding, all these feed yards are feeding for a grade. But I don't believe, truthfully, that they have calculated the improvement of genetic into their herds. And I believe that they're overfeeding 10, 15% because they've already achieved that grade. Once you achieve prime, you're prime. There's no more, right?
Yeah.
But they have overfed those animals. Mm-hmm. They kept piling feed, but they weren't getting anything else. I don't know of a single one of these feed yards that doesn't have some sort of a meat locker program for their friends, family, employee. And so they'll be able to pull their animals out of get a representative sample out of a pen, mm-hmm. take it to a state and federal inspected facility, have a grade assigned. Somebody said that once you have a grade assigned, you have to sell that meat.
Sure.
You can give that meat away.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Working within your program already, your meat locker program already. But now before you go off and market that pen, you kind of have a good idea about what that pen's going to yield in grade. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be able to stop. Once you see, okay, I got a pen of 100 and I pulled out 5, and now the 5, 3 were prime. Oh, well, I about maximized that issue here, the 10 here. Like, I can stop feeding, go ahead and get these animals out of here. Mm-hmm. This is serious economical changes that's going to impact the cattle producers.
Yeah. When you say that it's a serious change, I foresee it really. I mean, you're right. I see that because the fact that as you talked about the 4 different groups that it can affect, from the beef processors to the largest demographic being producers, seed stock producers, and then feed yards. That's a pretty good segment of our cattle industry that are family ranching operations and various family businesses. This could be a big turn.
And the only person up to today for the last 20, 30 years, the only person that has been able to capitalize on those premiums has been the Big Four. And that, and they passed some of the premium down. Let's not, I mean, it's not total, but they passed some of it down, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They give us food scraps, right? Now, and ultimately what this should do, we had a big, we joke, well, we don't joke, it's been serious about that, over the last 20, 30 years, the animals that migrated out, these independent processors, they've been starving for animals. They migrated away because, we can get the premium, some premium out of the Big Four and the convenience of, old tractor trailer trucks going away. Okay. And then 2020 hit. And then all of a sudden, people like me, mm-hmm. Well, now you're my friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we've also seen an erosion of that because the cattlemen realize there's a little work involved in direct marketing beef. I'd much rather move a whole animal and be done with it, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, because of the increase, because you're not going to get the scrap of the premium, you're going to get the whole premium. This is going to drive more animals back to the independent producer. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, as we're making all these major investments in these independent processors to be built across America, now we're getting these animals, the sustainability of these animals driving back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot to digest there. And I really encourage folks to just think through this, think through some of the things that we just talked about, and I think you'll understand the dynamics of what we're talking about here. We've got one more segment. Leah Biondo, Patrick Robinette with the U.S. Cattlemen's Association, as we're talking about the remote beef grading system pilot program that's out now and the details of what that means. We're going to continue on some final comments when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show as we're exploring the release that come out from the USDA regarding their remote grading pilot program that's out there. My guest today, Leah Biondo, Patrick Robinette with the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. Patrick is the chair of the Independent Beef Processors Committee. And as we sort of wrap this conversation up, in the last segment, you talked about the different groups that it's going to affect. Real quick, just one thing about this. You had said one of those groups being beef processors, which of course is who you represent, and you've got an experience in that, also direct selling your own products as well as a rancher yourself. But Patrick, from a processor standpoint, when you had addressed COVID in the previous section as well and how that really changed some of the dynamics within our cattle industry as well, we did see more money invested in either a buildup of some of these family small beef processing operations or some new ones being built. It's putting these guys on the same footing as the big ones.
Yes, sir. USDA was instrumentally involved in the money that was allocated out for the increase of the expansion and increased capacity of meat poultry processing. And the one thing that I always threw out there was this: you could throw all the money at the world at this whole problem, but if the producer does not bring their animals to that processor, the person who has made that investment to be there on his behalf, then this means absolutely nothing because they'll go broke. Mm-hmm. And so again, this will be a tool that an independent processor can add to their daily life. And again, it creates that other reason why these cattle could be driven to their location instead of going to the big four. Mm-hmm. For me, the nearest fat cattle slaughter is really in Tennessee, and I'd have to drive 7-8 hours.
Yeah.
Versus if I didn't have a mile facility, instead of going 30 miles down the road. Like, there's a whole dynamic of changes here, but it gives that independent processor a level playing field with the big four. Now, the big four does get the grading out at a little cheaper price, and that's the piece that in the pilot, as I told AMS, the people at AMS, I was grateful for what we've done, but let's not stop working.
Yeah.
Let's keep shrinking so that we can get this on the even playing field.
Yeah. Well, it's a big step in the right direction. There's no question about that. I know as everybody's listening to this, the thoughts are going through my head is that, boy, it reopens that potential door of looking at direct sale off your ranching operation. Maybe you've looked at it before and you thought, well, and from that standpoint, that's where folks need to look out and seek some assistance in some of that. There's folks that have been doing that know how to do that, have been there and done that sort of thing. The Department of Ag in each of the respective states probably has some assistance with all of that. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so each of your state agriculture departments has a department or agency that can handle this request. Mm-hmm. Another avenue to go through is USDA's Meat and Poultry Processing Technical Assistance Program, so NPPTA.
Okay.
And USDA has allocated, I think, like $25 million to several different organizations and groups to be able to provide you with technical assistance. So they can help with applying for a federal grant. They can help with financial planning, business planning. They can help with workforce development. They can help support you as you develop relationships with processors, suppliers, distributors, customers. So go check out that. That's the USDA Meat and Poultry Processing Technical Assistance Program.
Well, that's a mouthful, Leah.
It is a mouthful. It is a mouthful. An easier one might be to look up the Flower Hill Institute. That's flower is in floral, hill is in not a mountain, and institute. Flower Hill Institute, U.S. Cattlemen's Association has partnered with So we've been referring a lot of our members over to them for technical assistance. I'd also recommend checking out the ChopLocal marketplace. They've got a great course out right now on selling meat online direct to consumer. So you can get your branded beef certification, and you can sell directly to consumers using their online marketplace. So no upfront designing on your end.
Yeah. And folks, too, real quick, I will put these links to those sites that Leah mentioned in the show notes as well on our podcast page, so you can quickly find those. Patrick, I know you had said you'd been direct selling for quite some time. What's your thoughts as far as the technical assistance and seeking that out?
Yes. So not going to paint a rosy picture. It's not for the faint of heart, because, I mean, you are competing against the big four. You are competing against Cisco, US Food, but it can be done. I was out visiting a feed yard in Oregon and another one in Idaho, and we were having this discussion, and this one of the topics we were discussing. And I was like, somebody else has been telling our story. But we all individually have a story. There's a family, it's a Bingham Cattle Company out of Oregon. And they have a really, really, really cool story whenever you talk about their family legacy, their history. And they market right now about 50 head a year. They have a pen available for over 1,000 head. Wendy Bingham is saying, wait a second, I can expand here. But there's a lot of work. There's a lot of education, getting from the cattlemen. The cattlemen need to quit saying that they market steers and heifers, and they need to start saying we market beef. And when you take that mentality and you shift it there, every steer and every heifer from the day it's born has a brisket. It has a weight. And as that animal grows, that weight grows. And so learning what your genetics does, learning what your meat quality is, learning when to harvest, in my case in North Carolina, is not beneficial for me to get them to that 1,100 pound mark. I need to get them down to 1,183 to 1,200 mark. Learning all of that will shift your operation, become more efficient, become a bigger profit center, and then start diving into moving the cut, moving the rows, moving the primals. But you will be able to tell your story. Somebody won't be telling it for you. Mm-hmm. There's the challenges with the age of the cattleman, the average age of the cattleman. We had it when we started it 24 years ago. My father-in-law didn't even have a computer in his house. How were we going to talk about social media, or even talk about e-commerce and teach them how to use the computer? At the same time, my daughter and son are teaching me how to use AI. So there's new technology that even I'm not familiar with. But you've got to be willing to learn. As Leah was referencing, there's a bunch of organizations across the country that if you just reach out and say, look, I don't understand, please help. Mm-hmm. That's what they're there for. Yep. And so, it's going to be it'll be initially a little bit of work, but I'll use examples. Florida, had a direction where about every calf ran out of their state. And now within majority of their operations, they hold back a percentage of calves, and they've diversified their operation. And my God, what would the world look like if all the cattlemen had a diversified operation in 2020? Instead of me getting the phone call when the big four were shutting down, hey, my pens are backing up and I'm starving. Can you help me? Mm-hmm. Well, if you already had a diversified operation, you would have been, hey, I'm still kicking. I'm still moving forward. We need to quit being relying on one person on my living. We need to, diversify. And so there's going to be a little bit of a time period of adjustment here because of this remote grading option, but it can be done, and the margins will go in your pocket, and that's the biggest thing. You're going to be able to tell the story, the history, the legacy. Here's why I've done what I've done, and we're not going to be relying on somebody else to get it right.
You bet. All right. Well, Leah and Patrick, appreciate you guys taking the time out here. I know you both are busy, and Patrick, you're on the road. Leah, you're busy as always back in Washington working on things like this. A good step in the direction for the producers, the ranchers here in the countryside. Thanks for your work, and appreciate you guys being here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thank you.
You bet. And again, my guest today, Leah Biondo, Executive Vice President, U.S. Cattlemen's Association, and Patrick Robinette, who chairs the Committee of Independent Beef Processors for USDA. A lot of great information there. Now, like I said before, if you go to the podcast information of this show, I will put all of the links to the websites that we were talking about as well, so be sure to check that out. Stay with us. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, meteorologist Don Day is going to be joining us as we take a look at this long-term weather. And long-term, this time of the year might be a stretch. He's going to talk about that when we return on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the WeatherStationExperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit MeasureRain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to MeasureRain.com.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm kind of chuckling as we come out of break here. The Captain, Tim O'Byrne, usually steps in right about now for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents, but he is busy. I talked to him earlier this week, and he said, boy, I tell you what, I am swamped trying to get the next issue of Working Ranch Magazine out, so just tell everybody hi and wish them well. But nevertheless, I wanted to mention, I'm kind of laughing about this because a couple of weeks ago, let's see, this is episode 153, so it would have been episode 151. As he was traveling through Texas, he was describing also about maybe that we should put together a working ranch pickup, and he went through all the different details that pickup would have, and lo and behold, wouldn't you know, that I probably had more response on that than anything else that we've done. Not that we're overly controversial in any of our shows, but nevertheless, it was interesting. Folks really responded to that, Captain, so maybe we need to look into a working ranch pickup. Nevertheless, as we move forward here today, meteorologist Don Day is with us now. And Don, we always try to look out 7 to 10 days, but I know in listening to your podcast last week, one of the things that you were really warning people is be cautious about these 7 to 10 day forecasts.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of moving parts going on right now across the globe, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. I mean, we've got a lot of extremes going on, and that is always something that is a harbinger of change down the road. And when those changes happen, it's very difficult for our weather modeling, especially when you get 7, 10 to 14 days out, to really be able to have any degree of confidence. But it is so available now. Weather data is so available now on the internet, on your phone, on your laptop, and your channels on TV that always go out and try to make that 10 to 15, that 20-day forecast, which is okay. But in these situations, you always have to be really cautious and tell people, I certainly wouldn't plan your vacation or your long haul trip across the country based on those forecasts, especially with the extremes we're seeing now. I mean, we've got extreme cold in Alaska. I mean, we're talking going 7, 8, 9, 10 days of not getting above zero in some parts of Alaska and the Northwest Territories, 50 below zero temperatures. And then we're going to have temperatures really warming up. We've already seen that across a lot of the lower 48. And we're also seeing the development of what has been kind of what maybe to some people has been a late start to the El Nino, but the El Nino is really starting to come to life in terms of at least the El Nino impacts that we see coming in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, and that was something you had mentioned last week too, is as we're really now starting to see that El Nino weather pattern in our winter weather, and the west, southwest is really starting to see some moisture.
Yeah, in the last week, a lot of you probably heard about the heavy rains in San Diego, a lot of rain in California, parts of the Pacific Northwest. We saw some nice rains in southern Nevada, parts of southern Arizona, 1 to 2 inches of rain, parts of New Mexico. Those are the areas that is the El Nino starts to mature as the winter goes into its mature phase. That's where we tend to see the weather beginning to pick up. Now, as you go through the rest of the winter, those areas can expand to the north and to the east of where those impacts are. And what we see developing over the next week is a very strong, energetic jet stream that goes all across the Pacific. And I mean from from Japan and East Asia all the way to the California coast. And the Pacific Ocean, we talk about it all the time, Justin. The Pacific Ocean is the largest body of water on Earth, and it's bringing a tremendous amount of water vapor and cloudiness and storminess that will be pushed from the Pacific into Western North America. And that is something we see as we get into early February. So that's going to mean a much more active pattern, especially in the West, but the South as well.
Mm-hmm. And last week we had talked, and you're still kind of, I know in listening to you last week, you're still even adamant that while we see some pretty good weather here for maybe a week or so, you are suspecting something could change at some point here in February.
Yeah. Historically, what we're seeing out in the Pacific is a harbinger of big changes about a week or so down the road. And so we're going to see the weather do a flip. That's kind of how this winter has gone so far. We've had periods of very little weather, then all of a sudden it gets turned on its head, and that's what's going to happen again. Now, since it's Pacific dominated, that cold air I talked about up in the North Slope of Alaska, the Northwest Territories, Greenland, that's probably going to get locked up for a couple of weeks longer. So we don't see that severe cold entering the equation, at least in that period of time. But I think by the end of February, second half of February, that's something we'll have to factor into the equation as well. So I was joking with people when they asked me about what do you think February, March into April may look like for a lot of the U.S. And I tell them, here, hold my beer.
Yeah. Well, and I'm anticipating some pretty good weather, as you and I often talk, and I text you usually when I have fog updates here in our neck of the woods. I'm anticipating April to be kind of one of those type of months as well.
Yeah. So there's a lot of winter left, and it's nice to get this January thaw. I mean, it's very interesting human psychology. We have 20, 30, 40 degree below temperatures for a week. Then we have a few days that it's warmer and everybody forgot how cold it was.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Don, we'll appreciate it. Thanks for the outlook here, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
And again, that is meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. You can find his daily video podcast from his website at dayweather.com or his YouTube channel as well. Stay with us. We're going to talk about what's in store for the next couple of weeks here on the Working Ranch Radio Show when we come back after this. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. Before we head out here today, just a couple things as I have been perusing through the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine. It is the January-February issue. Two things come to mind. First of all, if you're in the need of buying bulls, you're going to be looking at genetics this year, wanting to make some changes in your cattle herd. This is kind of a one-stop shop. You can get to Working Ranch Magazine, and not only can you find some great information, articles in there, I'll talk about that in just a moment, but also a pretty good list of some of the bull sales going on all across the country. So I'd encourage you to take a look at your latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine for that. Also, when we're talking bulls, boy, there's a great article about what you need to be doing in terms of getting those bulls ready to go for breeding season. A lot of good information in that about condition and mineral nutrients and things that they'll need along those lines, and just getting them ready. And I think you'll find that article. In fact, it starts on page 32. It's called Prep Those Bulls by Gilda V. Bryant. A great article there. Check it out. It's in the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine. And if you don't have your subscription to Working Ranch Magazine, it's pretty simple. You can go to workingranchmag.com and get your subscription started today. Real quick, just one other thing. Speaking of Working Ranch Magazine, make sure you look for them down at the CattleCon convention that'll be in Orlando starting January 31st through February 2nd. They will be there in the trade show. Be sure to stop by the booth and say hi to the folks there at Working Ranch Magazine. And be sure to tune in next week because we're going to be talking water rights, but more specifically, a court case in Idaho that's being closely watched regarding water rights and the federal government, and how that could have wider implications beyond just water rights for all of us in agriculture. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. I'm Justin Mills. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.